to just kind of get the party started here, I would like to welcome everybody to the NANOG 86 Hackathon. Uh, my name is Steve Ulrich. I'm on the Hackathon committee. Be doing a brief intro and overview of what we have in the mix here for NANOG 86. We'll introduce Leo to go over what's going on with PeeringDB and a little bit about some of the other options that we have for folks who are participating in the hackathon. And then Chris will run through the environment in more detail and kind of get folks oriented around what we have available for folks with the VMs who are participating in the hackathon. Just a bit about the hackathon. NANOG's mission is really about education, and the hackathon is a key part of that, encouraging folks to get exposure to new technologies and hack away at projects of interest. All the times here are listed in Pacific Daylight. Hacking will kick off on Saturday, October 14th, starting at 1 p.m. This initial bit will be virtual. Mentors will be available in the Slack and available on Zoom to help. The hackathon hours are from 1 to 4 on Saturday, on Sunday from 12 to 5. There will be a close. We'll go a little bit more detail on that in a bit. There is a room for this at NANOG 86 Hollywood Studio ABC on the mezzanine level. This will be open from 10 to 6 on Sunday the 15th, and I believe lunch is included. We do have Slack and Zoom set up. You should have all received an invite to the Slack space. Everybody who's registered should be a member of the NANOG 86 Hackathon channel. You can create your individual team Slack channels in here. You can use @mentors. We, as a matter of decorum and convenience, encourage you not to use @here or @channel or at all, unless there's a really, really pressing matter. And then there will also be a Zoom available. Details for that, I believe, are in the Slack and should have been forwarded via email as well. Strenuously encourage you to have updated your Zoom client in advance of the hackathon. Now, the first theme is packing up your toolkit. This is effectively, we're encouraging folks to look at their favorite network automation, networking-oriented tools, and where there isn't something that facilitates installation or deployment in your environment of choice, consider contributing to the distribution of choice or to the OS of choice, your favorite tool, and you put it in a user consumable, readily ingestible format. In order to facilitate this, we have some infrastructure set up that you can route on and hack on. I will point out that there are a couple of hosts in here, as well as a couple of routers. We have CentOS, and I thought that we had
an
Ubuntu box in here as well.
Yeah, I missed updating that graphic, but yes, the CentOS 2 has been replaced with an Ubuntu image, so you can have both flavors of packaging available.
Yes.
Apologies for that.
Right on. Thank you, Chris. So in this environment are a couple of CEOS Container Lab images, as well as containerized RPD. You can use these to interact directly with nodes to test in your environment. And then the CentOS 1 and CentOS 2/Ubuntu hosts can be used for developing and working on the packaging of whatever the tool is that might be of interest to you. Additionally, these can be used for working with the other project that Leo will be talking to us about in order to provide a place for you to poke at PeeringDB deployment with Ubuntu and CentOS. With respect to teams, if you have a team and you have a project that you're working on, within the hackathon here, that's awesome. If you don't, happy to help facilitate engagement or team forming here. If you're just joining the hackathon as a spot to kind of work on something that you're personally or individually interested in, is like looking for the space to get the opportunity to concentrate on something, that's all good too. But we do have the Slack and the infrastructure there for folks to poke at. I would like to go back to this infrastructure slide a bit. Given that one of the themes here for the hackathon is packaging up your own toolkit, we have two distributions that are popular here in the infrastructure. CentOS and Ubuntu. We realize that there are other distributions that folks might want to package tooling for, different OSs, these sorts of things. We do have the ability to spin up VMs in the AWS infrastructure for some of these. We'd encourage you to reach out in the Slack channel in advance of the hackathon to let us know if there's something that you're specifically interested in, and we'll see if we can support that. Christy, maybe have a couple of comments on that. I think we're looking at folks can certainly use the free tier in AWS in order to spin up images, and then we do have some options for supporting this as well.
Yeah. So if you have an AWS account, there are a number of base image types, instance types that are under the free tier that are more or less free for limited personal use in this environment. So if you need an instance just to do development work on, a base CentOS, Ubuntu, Red Hat, actually not CentOS, Red Hat, Ubuntu. You can use your own AWS account. What we are able to provide is, because AWS, we have a relationship with AWS. They're an in-kind sponsor. So for larger instances, if needed, we have templates available that we can spin up instances that 8 gigs quad CPU for larger workloads if needed. We've set up templates for RHAL and Ubuntu, but other flavors are available. So if there's something you need that is larger than the free tier, talk to us and we can set it up for you. The Container Lab is our base template that we issue, and that has containerized versions of CentOS and Ubuntu for use with the lab, and if you need to run applications that interact with the lab environment. So that's the use for that infrastructure.
A little bit more on Sunday. Each group is invited to present their work. We'll have additional details. Then there is somebody who will be doing brief interviews after the hackathon. There's a bit of a video montage, if you will, that's part of the general session on Wednesday. I don't know that you need to glam it up, but folks will definitely be encouraged to provide an interview and talk about what they did and what they learned. I'll take a moment to survey the attendees. Is there any projects open that folks are planning to work on that you might want to talk about, solicit teammates for, wax poetic about?
Hi, Steve. This is Sean from Core Technologies. So I do have a project that I'm kind of thinking about and somewhat working on. The project is actually all about mapping geographic routes to create long distance networking paths optimized on latency, and there is a caveat in such topologies to take care of regarding diversity. So these routes are typically in a KMZ based configuration, so we can see them in Google Earth. But then the topology that we would like to deliver is through a Network X module of Python, which allows lots of SPF-based calculations to compute routes on the fly. So I'll be looking forward to working with any teammate that may be intrigued by this idea.
That sounds interesting. If you have, like, I don't know if you have a GitHub repo or anything along those lines where you might have more information about the project or kind of, an abstract, certainly encourage you to share that in the Slack in advance of the hackathon.
Okay, I will try to do some quick a single page or 2-page PowerPoint to look to share. Thank you.
That would be great. Thank you. Leo, we had Sean, just give us a quick overview of a project he was looking at. Do you want to, dig into what you've got going on with PeeringDB?
The project we're bringing to this hackathon is about PeeringDB PY, which is the PeeringDB reference implementation of a local cache. We have a caching client. It can give users a better experience. It has limited documentation, and we would like to make it easier for users to install and use. I've got a little picture here of the place where we have the documentation, and this deck of slides with links and everything in it will be going into the Slack, if that's okay. When you scroll down to the bottom of this, there is actually a link to a post on our technical list from SIX, the Seattle Internet Exchange Point, showing how they installed PeeringDB PY. So it's not quite as bare as you see here. But that being said, we would like to encourage more people to use it, and that means making the experience easier and better. It's possible that some people don't actually know about PeeringDB, which is absolutely fine. You can sort of think of PeeringDB as like a specialist Yellow Pages for interconnection. I've got an example here of a record for Amazon, and it shows you the kind of information that we have: the AS number for the network, the internet exchange points where they have a presence, and interconnection facilities where they have a presence, that kind of thing. Also, if you're logged into PeeringDB, you can get access to contact information so that you can request peering or debug a technical issue if you're already peering with a network. So, as I mentioned, PeeringDB PY is a local cache. You can host it on your own infrastructure. That obviously means that it's going to be much more responsive because it could be right next to you. Your own infrastructure does include laptops. In the past, we have had bug reports for PeeringDB PY running on a laptop where there was a time zone issue and it didn't work when it went west of a certain time zone. So we know that it can be installed on laptops, but we don't have any good instructions. And just because someone who is very experienced can do it doesn't mean that everyone can do it. There's a lot of people who are involved in interconnection who use tools, but they are not themselves the people who write or maintain those tools. And we want to provide services that are usable by everyone involved in the industry, not just the people who create and maintain tools. So this is not just a local cache that you can update once a month or something. You can literally update it once an hour. And it's a very efficient way of keeping the data live. It just gives you the changes. So you don't have to download the whole file, even though the whole file is under 50 megabytes. It's not huge. But this is a very efficient reference implementation. What we would like to do is install it on essentially base operating systems, sort of as they come in, fresh out of installation, and go and work out what is missing and what do we need to do. So, maybe there's some packages that aren't included in baseline installation that are prerequisites, and the people who have previously installed this either knew that or found it out, or they had those packages installed anyway. Are there system configuration issues, character sets, the time zone issue that I already mentioned? what about the database? In the future, we would love it if we could have an installation that actually went and did the database thing for you. That might be a goal beyond what we can accomplish in this hackathon, but that's the direction of travel we would like to aim for. And we, we'd love to see it working on baseline installations. But if anyone has a laptop and they want to see if they can install it on their laptop, and we get useful feedback that helps us improve the PeeringDB PY implementation, then we'd love that. If we can work out what the bugs are, we can document them, we can fix them, we can make it easier for people in the future. There's benefits for everyone in doing this. If you are someone who volunteers to participate in this project, you get a window into the NANOG community. It doesn't show you everything that NANOG does, but it gives you an idea about some of the things that NANOG does. There's obviously a public benefit in that this is very useful to people. They use the data regularly. And of course, we'd like to thank you. We can make you some custom swag. If you want a water bottle or a hoodie or something like that, then that is certainly achievable, and we would be very happy to arrange that. I am on the Slack. I will be either putting this file or a link to a Google Drive link, whichever is preferred, in the Slack later on.
Next up is Chris Woodward, who will go over the infrastructure.
So what we've done, and this is you've been to previous hackathons. A lot of this will be familiar to you. We utilize a system called Container Lab for standing up lab instances in cloud infrastructure. Container Lab is maintained by our friends at Nokia, and they've worked with us pretty closely to help us get a system that works well for us. And what that effectively does is creates containers that are set up in virtual network topologies such that the various containerized network OSs behave like a real network would. There's a private key that I've shared into the Slack. So if we issue you an instance, you'll need to grab that public key and use that to log in. You can interact with a number of ways. You can set up SSH tunnels between your laptop and the network OS instances using the host IP as your SSH tunnel endpoint. You can interact. You can get code onto those instances via shared repository. Git push from your desktop, and then go to the instance and git pull there. Or you can develop directly on those servers, which works, but keep in mind that these are all ephemeral instances, so anything that you don't pull off of them at the end of the hackathon will be lost. This is a quick diagram. Yeah, this is the diagram I did update. Apologies to Steve for that. But it's a relatively simple topology, but the important thing is to see that there's two CEOS instances, which is Arista's containerized router OS, and then two CRPD instances, which is Juniper's containerized router operating system, which is a subset of the full Junos, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then there are two OS containers hanging off of those routers. One is running CentOS, the other is running Ubuntu. So if you're looking for different packaging targets, you've got both RPM and apt packaging systems available. Basic instructions for SSHing. We will give you an IP address for the node you want to access. You just need to drop the PM file that is in Slack to your .ssh directory. Important thing that everybody misses, including myself a lot. Your private key cannot be group or world readable in your directory. You have to change the owner permissions so that only you can read that file. Otherwise, the SSH client won't use it. And then you use the -I switch to use the SSH key to log into your instance. Now, since I wrote this, I was alerted to the fact that if that key is in your .ssh directory, you don't have to use the -I switch. It will find it automatically. So that's not strictly necessary. But if the key is anywhere not in your .ssh directory, you need to use the -I switch to point to it, to use it for auth. So here's just a walkthrough of that process. I like to set the key location as an environment variable, and then you can use that to access everything else you need. And then once it's in your SSH directory, you can then utilize it, and you can see you're running the SSH command there with the Ubuntu user. So the instances that are running CLab are Ubuntu instances. So the default user for all those is Ubuntu. So you can see that there in the SSH command, and that is the v6 address for that particular instance I'm logging into. A word about the IP addresses: IPv4 addresses are ephemeral. V6 addresses are not. So if for some reason the instance needs to be stopped and restarted, it will get a new v4 address, but it will retain its v6 address. So just be mindful of that. And if you need us to restart an instance, we can do that, but we'll need to tell you what the new IP address of that instance is after it's restarted. So a little bit about CLab. CLab is the client binary that ContainerLab uses. And this is effectively an output of the instances that are running in the ContainerLab environment. So actually, this is also an older screenshot that I did not update. But this is you can see the two Unix instances and then the COS and CRPD instances there. One other change I'll point out is that previously these were very minimal OS instances. They're now a bit fully formed. They have systemd running on them so you can create systemd unit files for testing startup stop scripts for any services that you want to run on those boxes. A intrepid hacker has created an image that runs Graphite. Later on today, I'll be taking that out for a spin and see if that works well here, and possibly updating these images yet again. If you're accessing these images, just be aware that there are different default users for different images. Sorry, not default users, default execution binaries. So CEOS images, the EOS command line is accessed by running a binary called CLI. Keep in mind that the C is capitalized. CRPD uses the same, but it's lowercase CLI. So if you were to just exec into these, you'll get a bash shell, which you won't be able to do much useful stuff from. But you run these binaries, and that will get you into the traditional router OS environment that we're all used to. So just a screenshot illustrating that. Note the command. Normally, you would use CLab commands to manage the instances, but for getting shell access on them, use Docker's exec command. Obviously, everything needs to be run with sudo, so Docker exec IT is for interactive, and then your container name, and then in this case, CLI capitalized to get to the COS executable environment. If you're not familiar with with Arista EOS, if you know Cisco, you won't need much. It won't be very alien to you. You won't need much hand-holding. There's a little bit of fun history is that early days of Arista's history, the command line was so similar that Cisco sued them over it. That is long behind us. So again, illustrate that the COS environment is very similar to Cisco. Almost all of the commands work the way that you expect them to. Show interface, show IP route, show IPVGP summary. Basic routing commands all work the way you expect them to. One substantial difference from iOS is the configuration environment. Classic iOS, every config command takes effect when you hit return. EOS has a function called configure session, which allows you to batch up a number of config changes and then commit them at once, similar to GNOS configure mode. And there's a link to the documentation for that. CRPD, if you're familiar to GNOS, again, it is effectively GNOS config language. Most exec commands run the way you expect them to, except for the ones that don't actually interact with the routing daemon. So a number of commands require dropping into the bash shell network commands, ping, ARP, trace route. If you run those from the RPD shell, you'll get command not found. But if you do start shell, you'll get to a bash shell, and then you can run from there. This is a RPD showing should BGP summary, runs the same you expect it to, and any other GNOS. Ping, not so much. So you need to drop to a shell to see that. So how you do that? Start shell, run your ping command. And you can also see, you can actually run Linux style route commands. So IP route show will give you the Linux's view of the routing table, which is an interesting aside. So in this instance, there is a directory opt clab. Now the clab YAML file is where the topology gets defined, and this is a fairly simple YAML file, but just to walk through it. So if you want to change the topologies at all, this is the file that you'll do it in. So there is a definition for each node and a link to its basic configuration file, and also its management. So if you want to create an SSH tunnel between your desktop and the image, this is the IP address of the tunnel endpoint that you will use in your SSH tunneling command. And these are the definitions for the CentOS and Ubuntu's. There's a small shell script to configure the host IP addresses, mainly because running DHCP on the instances seemed a bit overly complicated, so easier just to do this statically. Once you have your nodes defined, you then define links in this section here. So what the links do is you map endpoints. So the COS instruments connects to the CRPD, and on and on. And this defines the actual network topology. So if you want to do anything, if you want to bring up a different OS as one of these end nodes, if you want to try a different instance, just get in touch and I can help you with that, walk you through it. And every clab command is going to require the -t tag to define the topology. You can have multiple topologies running at the same time. You just have to define them separately. Let's say I want to log into an RPD. And I am in a GNOS CRPD, 22.1R110, show IP route. All your basic network commands are here. Your inet0, v4, v6 table. Here are our BGP neighbors. You see they're pretty new because we just spun up this instance. Show configuration works the way you expect it to. Again, this is CRPD, so it uses, this is basically RPD running directly on Linux without the intermediary VSDOS that GNOS uses. So you'll see that these interfaces are Linux style interface numbers versus the ET dash blah blah that you usually see with GNOS. A simple BGP policy and neighbor statements. So if you know GNOS, you'll be right at home. If you want to stop and restart the topology, you will use the clab destroy command. I am going to kill the topology. And this is something you'll need to do if you ever want to make changes to it. Just use the destroy command in the container. And then to redeploy it, you can also use the systemctl. We created a systemctl unit file for this. So hackathon _clab. So the deploy command, clab deploy -t, -u. And if you're familiar with systemctl syntax, you'll see that it prints the log and it has spun up okay, it did not work. So clab deploy is the command that you would use to start up the topology. So Not sure why the systemctl didn't work, but if this does the trick, then that's that.
Chris, this is Leo. Would there be a handy one-page guide or something that we could use to refresh ourselves on all of these commands?
Yeah, let me find Container Labs documentation. If you want to experiment with this, we've been using it quite a long time, so happy to help with any obscure questions you might have about running Container Lab. If you want to run your own topologies or customize this at all, we can most likely give you a hand.
Yeah, the other thing too is if folks are looking for a team, or if you have teams assembled, please feel free to hit the Slack. Shan, I think you were looking to get some folks to help out with your topology project as well. Drop a couple of slides in the Slack as well, and I think an overview there would be helpful.
I actually have a quick question.
Shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have this topology, right? And we implement a solution on the given topology, and then do we containerize it, or I didn't quite get that bit.
Well, the OS instances that are part of the topology are all containers themselves, so you can't run a container on a container, unfortunately. But if you want to use those as packaging targets, so if you want to test, if say you've got a tool you want to package up as say an RPM or a WND package, and then see if you can install that on those instances and run them against the virtual routers that are containerized as well. That's the use case that we had in mind for this particular iteration of the topology.
I suppose also if folks are comfortable working in the Ubuntu host environment, right, Chris, they could use
absolutely.
the Docker environment there in order to containerize something if they were interested in creating a containerized package for a particular tool.
Of course,
do that in that environment as well.
Yeah, you can install a container on the instance itself is the Ubuntu images, the one that's running Container Lab. So you can certainly run, and it's running Docker, so you can absolutely create other containers that run alongside the Container Lab topology, and they actually should be able to communicate across the management interfaces, which is why the IP addresses in that topology YAML file are important, because that's, if you want a container that is not part of the image, not part of the topology, but communicates with the devices in it, you can use those endpoints to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, I have a question that's most regarding to the infrastructure part, since you told you are working with the Nokia guys. Like, even I work on Container Labs for my job. And
Okay, cool.
have you tried running a Container Lab using Kubernetes, because it's everything is container, right? I just wanted to know about that.
We haven't experimented with Kubernetes based deployment. That is definitely something that would be interesting to try. Because right now we're building these. Right now, I build these more or less manually. So better ways to automate the deployment of these. We create I create it manually and then create an AMI and then use a launch template to spin up copies of it. So, but something using EKS may be interesting. That might be something to work on next weekend even.
I was also point out, on Wednesday at NANOG, there will be a presentation by some folks at Google regarding KNE, which is Kubernetes Network Emulation Environment, which is provides an execution environment very much like what Container Lab provides for folks who are kind of Kubernetes oriented.
I didn't catch the name. What's the name of the product?
It's called KNE. They'll be presenting on it on Wednesday at NANOG.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. The main issue trying to launch Container Lab in Kubernetes would be the fact that right now Container Lab uses virtual Ethernet pairs to do the wiring So if you do that in Kubernetes, you essentially need to have a specialized CNI to replace that.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's the big amount of work that needs to happen if you, for some reason, want to port Container Lab to support Kubernetes.
Okay.
Or you look at the KNE, really.
Got it. Yeah. There are two CNIs like NSM and Meshnet. Yeah, I was checking through that, and that's why I came
Exactly.
up with the question.
So the KNE is actually using Meshnet. So
okay,
that's the
that's
prime
nice.
example of that. Yes.
I would like to learn more.
Either on Wednesday, Chris.
I'll be there on Sunday.
Alex is presenting as well.
Alex, okay, you are the developer of KNE?
No, but my company works a lot in KNE environments, so I can definitely share a lot of experience.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Question for Leo, if you're still on, about getting involved with the PeeringDB. My coding skills are on the weaker side, and you mentioned the testing and documentation side might be somewhere you'd be looking for help. Would you be looking for that just as kind of fork and pull requests to the GitHub repo, or something like that? And are you going to be, I guess, coordinating that through the Slack, and will there be like a channel specifically for the PeeringDB team, so to speak?
Sort of yes to all of that. Yes, there is a PeeringDB channel. Yes, you don't need to be a software developer to help. If you can follow the instructions and try to work out what breaks, then that is in and of itself helpful, because that means that we can either go and say, oh, there's a dependency and we need to document it, and then when we put in the dependency, the package installs properly, or we can go and eventually build some automation that will go and take a look at your system and go and say, you don't have these things, we need to pull them in, and then install it for you. And one of the things that we're sort of thinking about is, for instance, if you're installing it on a laptop, you might not have a database installed already, and therefore it could give you some options regarding databases. Very much whatever you feel you can contribute, we would be glad to have that. And I am very happy to chat with you during the week, or of course I will be there in Hollywood and we can sit down together and talk about what we want to test and do.
Very cool. Looking forward to it. I just requested Thursday and Friday off to try to get up to speed on the various projects that have been mentioned, and looking forward to joining in Hollywood. I'll be a little late for the Saturday session, but looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Any additional questions or items folks would like to bring up?
I'll bring one thing. Sorry, I was late to the game today. So as we're going to be presenting the Open Traffic Generator API on Wednesday, one of the things that I would propose for anyone who is looking for a cool project to work on, I can help you put together a continuous integration, like an example, where you want to test some network images, maybe in Container Lab or something like that, with a free version of the traffic generator. So you can push, packets. You can we can maybe see if you can, bring up protocols, inject routes, do all that stuff in, let's say, GitHub Actions, so that you can see if maybe like a new version of FRR fails in your scenario or passes, something broken automatically. Those kind of projects, I would be there available to help, set them up and contribute if needed.
Alex, just a question. Like, you were telling using the traffic injector in Container Lab. Is that what you meant?
Yes, that's correct. We actually, from where I'm coming from, it's part of the Open Traffic Generator project. We have a free traffic generators that can run inside Container Lab, and there's a public API how to communicate with them. There are examples. I'm planning to push a new website, hopefully tonight, maybe over the weekend, with all that information. I'll share that over the Slack channel so you guys can take a look and see if you can maybe take one of the examples and modify it to your needs.
That sounds great, Alex. Yeah, if you could share that with the Slack, that'd be great. And also, I seem to recall that XCC was accessible via kind of a like a GHCR endpoint or something along those lines, or a Docker, and like for folks to be able to integrate into their environments.
Right. It's a Docker, and it runs in Container Lab, among other things.
Yeah,
and
so
it has an API, so you can like run a Go or Python script against it.
Right. Yeah, that might actually be a useful addition to future infrastructure topologies, or if you could provide folks with pointers on how they could stick that onto the existing infrastructure topology. Good point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me take that action, and I'll put together an example using the Hackathon setup. All right.
Right on. Thank you. If there's nothing else, we can probably stop the recording, Valerie, and encourage folks to bring things up on the Slack.